Firmly push down the brake pedal, hit OK again. And it's holding the front wheels completely stationary while the backs can spin away as much as they like. Finally, the new Ford Mustang S650 has arrived in Australia. I'm here at the Bend Motorsport Park. We're going to do some track driving tomorrow. I'm not sure what's involved exactly, whether we're doing a full lap or just some little sprint sections, but I'll try and do a 0 to 100 as well at some point, and we'll go for a bit of a POV drive as well. Let's have a quick look at this example. This is the GT with the Brembo brake package, which also includes MagneRide suspension, so basically adaptive dampers. It's also got the Recaro seat option. The design has been tweaked a little bit from the previous model, but you can tell it's definitely a Mustang. The 3 tail light system at the back, although now it's a bit more angular. And then this model, this version doesn't have a rear spoiler, more of a clean look. And then the black alloy wheels. The front end is probably the biggest change. Brand new headlights, a bit thinner, a bit more pointed. And you've got these new bars that come down in the middle of the grille in the V8, and a bonnet scoop or a heat extraction vent in the bonnet. This has got the black pack as well, so all of the trimmings like the side mirrors, the roof, the wheels, the front spoiler and all that are all in black, giving it that sort of street appeal. Under the bonnet is the good old 5-litre naturally aspirated V8. It's one of the last, or one of the only V8 naturally aspirated models you can still buy brand new in Australia. Just trying to think, I don't think there's any others, certainly not in this price range, that you can get. 347 kilowatts. You can still get a manual transmission, which is what this one is, or a 10-speed auto. And then inside, it's pretty similar to the previous model, certainly in terms of the shape and the size. It's just got this brand new dual screen dash. Awesome V8 soundtrack as usual. We'll go for a drive in a second and try out the different exhaust modes. I like the new touchscreen, although it does take up a little bit of space. There's my eyesight there, and it's like just at the top, so it kind of is a little bit of a distraction if you're a pure driving enthusiast per se, whereas you want something that's just out of the way and a bit further down. But if you want a big touchscreen, you like the technology, then you'll love this. It does have a home button as well, and then you've got your climate controls, which remain there all the time, so you can easily just turn the aircon off or change the temperature or fan speed. The fan speed has its own little separate pop-up thing, but at least you do have the main controls always accessible. You don't have to go digging around to adjust certain settings. But you do have lots of settings you can play around with as well, and including with the digital instrument cluster here. I do like the gauges in this layout actually, with the white dials. It kind of looks, I mean, it probably doesn't look like it on camera, but it kind of looks like they're analog dials if you just look at it quickly. You do have rear seats, but I'm not going to bother getting into those because they're pretty small. I mean, I can sit in them for, a short distance as long as someone in the front is willing to push their seat forward a bit. But yeah, they're really not meant for long distance touring with 4 adults. They're just kind of a temporary thing, take your mates down to the pub or something like that. You do have a wireless phone charger for the MY24. So this is an MY24 model. They have just announced, or Ford Australia has announced, an MY25 update with some color changes, and they've actually removed the wireless charger just because of production issues. I didn't quite understand what they meant by that. But yeah, good to see that there is a manual still existing. Then yeah, you've got a couple of cup holders, a decent sized center box, and then some storage in the doors as well. Although they're not that big, you can just fit a 600ml bottle if you lie it down. All right, let's take it for a spin, and I'll try and do a quick 0 to 100 somewhere out here. I mean, we've got plenty of space, so there shouldn't be a problem finding somewhere. Before we set off, there are a number of modes you can choose from, including driving modes. You've got sport, I've got it in racetrack at the moment, drag strip mode, slippery mode, and a custom mode, so you can mix and match different settings. I'll leave it in the racetrack mode. But if you hit this Mustang button down here, it'll take you to all the mode sort of area. So you can change the 4 different modes for the exhaust, and then you can go in and change the cluster theme. So you've got more of a traditional layout with the circular dials, or you can put it back to the racetrack, which is what I've got it on now. So there's like a rev counter that goes across horizontally with the gear selection right in the middle, which I like. And then you've got live tire pressure monitoring on the side there. You can actually change the different displays for that as well. And if we go back to here, we've got the track apps. So this has got all sorts of different stuff you can play around with, including an acceleration timer, but that is linked to the speedo rather than true GPS. But it's fun to play around with. You know, you can have a go at 0 to 100 and compare it with your mate's car that's the same. It's got the same sort of timing gear, and then have a pretty consistent result. You've also got lap timer, and you've also got launch control. Now, in my experience, I have tried it with this on the track. The launch control mode, it's not as quick as doing it yourself. And in my experience with manual gearboxes, you can usually get a better time by yourself, with manual transmissions, that is. If this had a dual clutch gearbox or something like that, for sure, launch control is awesome. I just find that it kind of bogs down a bit, tries to control the wheel spin, and then, yeah, it's kind of too late. And if you put the revs too high, then yeah, it will spin the wheels too much, and then it will really bog down, because it will trying to harness that wheel spin. And if you put it too low, then it kind of bogs down as well. So I don't know, I find that if you just launch yourself, rev it up to about 3,000 RPM or 2,500, and then just come off the clutch very gradually and sort of wind it out a little bit, and then you can snap through the gears. But we'll do the 0 to 100 later on, and I'll show you what the best result was. But if we go back here, we've also got other things like drift brake. So this is the handbrake that when you set it into a certain mode, you've got to have the stability and everything turned off. This becomes like a drift handbrake. So you just pull it up, and it's like a hydraulic handbrake almost. So we had a bit of a play around with that on the skid pan. It seemed pretty good. It does have a different sort of, it's not just on or off, so you do have to be careful, or not be careful, but just get used to where it actually grabs. And if you just pull it quickly, it'll just sort of lock the wheels quickly. So it's kind of like a hydraulic handbrake, but not quite. But yeah, very interesting. I'm not sure what the idea behind that is. I think Ford must have just wanted to come up with something fun and clever and interesting, although judging by the various internet videos of Mustangs that you see, I don't know about introducing a handbrake to that sort of thing. But anyway, if you don't want to use it as a drift handbrake, it's still the normal park brake. You just have to lift it up a little bit, and it's like think of it as like a little electronic pull tab handbrake, where you just pull it up a little bit, and to get it off, put your foot on the brake and just push the handle down, and the park brake will come off. The other mode we've got here is line lock. So we'll try that on the private road a bit later on. It basically locks the front wheel so you can spin the rears. On the drag strip, warming the tires can be beneficial, but usually with road tires, it doesn't really do anything, to be honest, because road tires, you know, they don't get warm enough, they don't get sort of sticky enough to actually help with that. If you've got semi-slicks on or something like that, then yeah, the line lock will definitely help. Or if it's a really cold day, I suppose spinning the wheels a little bit just to get a bit of heat into them, it might help. But yeah, really it's more, I think, for fun, and just to or if you're going to go to the drag strip and put slicks on it or something like that, then yeah, that's a handy feature. But we'll check that out later on. So for this drive, I'm just going to leave it in race mode. I've got the stability control turned off just so it doesn't intervene. I've got the stop start off as well, and we'll leave the exhaust in the race setting, which I think automatically engages when you hit race mode. On a typical winding road, coarse surface, so we're obviously not at the bend anymore. I've managed to take this one away to do some recording myself. But yeah, this is a pretty rough road. I like this road because it's got some bumps in it, it's got some off-camber bits, it's got some weird apexes as well, and it just helps me discover what the vehicle's all about and put it under a bit of pressure as well and see how it handles. So firstly, the gearing in this is quite long. This is the GT model, and yeah, it's got the long-legged gearing, good cruisability, which is, you know, perfect for a Mustang, perfect for a muscle car. If you go for the Dark Horse model, the gearing is a bit shorter, and it is noticeable. We'll throw to some on-track footage in a minute. I did a few laps with some telemetry all in the vehicle, and it was, yeah, you could definitely notice the difference between the GT and the Dark Horse straight away. One of the big differences is the gearbox. So this has got a Getrag 6-speed, while the Dark Horse has a Tremec 6-speed. And when you're cruising around, I find this GT gearbox just easier. It's very smooth, goes into gears, and it's a bit lighter as well. Whereas the Tremac gearbox, it's very mechanical, and you know, you've got to put it into the gear slot exactly, and it's just a bit more, it requires a bit more finesse. But when you're on the track and you're really flat changing it and want to shift gears very quickly, it works much better than this one. So this one will, you know, kind of doesn't like snapping into second gear too quickly, and it's certainly from second to third, whereas the Tremac, you can actually just slam it home and it just goes in and it's ready to go. So the Tremac is definitely set up for track driving better, in my opinion, whereas this is set up better for cruising around. You can still go for a spirited drive, but mainly, yeah, it's just easier to maneuver through the gears in terms of the pressure required by your hand to maneuver it through the gears. This does have rev matching technology. I haven't been able to figure out where you turn it off, but anyway, it seems to be pretty adaptive as well. Like if you come into a corner pretty fast, change down to second a bit early, it'll rev the engine a bit more aggressively, whereas if you just do that again without a corner, so I'm in third and I'll just change down a gear while the revs are pretty low. It's sort of a bit, I'll do that again actually. So I'm in third, going reasonably slow, brakes on. So it sort of just gives it a gentle rev. So it is actually rev matching or speed matching, so you can change down a gear easily. But yeah, long gears, so second gear winds right out past 100 kilometers an hour. And yeah, it's not the best for this road specifically, because this is quite a technical, lots of corners, you know, it requires pretty much second gear the whole way, basically. But yeah, good long leg torque. Give it some gas. Good traction, so that's full throttle. It doesn't just snap into oversteer. Yeah, I think the tyres do really well. The communication is probably the weakest link. It's just a little bit delayed and a little bit clunky in terms of the steering as well as the throttle response. And an example of that is we were out on the skid pan in the wet, and I took the 4-cylinder turbo version out, and I couldn't maintain a nice drift around these cones they had set up. Now, I'm not saying I'm a professional driver, but generally I know how to do that. Like I've done it when I was younger, and you know, lost my license quite a few times actually doing that sort of stuff, and I just couldn't get into the groove of holding a drift in the 4-cylinder. It just was a little bit hard for me anyway. Whereas the V8, it was just a bit more responsive. Still a lot of work with the steering wheel and the throttle. I mean, obviously a professional driver can do it perfectly, and even you and I, you can get it right if you get used to it. But you know, you can jump into an MX-5 or a Toyota GR86 or whatever, BRZ, or an M3 for that matter, and I find anyway, you can just do it perfectly straight away almost. It's just a bit more engaging, a bit more communication coming through, telling me what's going on. Whereas in this, it's still a little bit delayed. It is a muscle car at the end of the day, so you know, you can't expect razor sharp handling, especially from this GT model. This is not a hardcore model. This is more of a flagship cruiser, bit of luxury, but still the V8 performance. Out on the track in the Dark Horse,
yeah, this just feels like a completely different animal. Just more punchy, a bit tighter in the steering and the suspension. It feels like it wants to be here more so than the GT. We did do a couple of laps in the GT just for reference. So coming into this corner, you can definitely carry a lot more speed through there. I was still getting used to the track. And then coming down through here, I was going back to second gear, where I think the Dark Horse in particular, you could carry through third gear because it's got that shorter gearing. Then I was wasting time going back up to third gear. Then through this part, it's flat out into fourth gear, just ease off the throttle just a little bit, then just put it straight back down again, carry the speed all the way through down to this little downhill section, and hard on the brakes, good brakes, back to second gear, ready to punch it out of this corner and into this complex series through here. Now I was going through here in second gear. I was talking to the instructor, and he was just trying to weigh up what was the best gear, but third is actually better, especially in the Dark Horse, because again you've got that bit more torque from the gearing itself, so you can just leave it in third. Screaming all the way down here, back to second again, whereas you could probably carry through third if you're pretty quick and just carried the speed through. Certainly through this last corner in third gear, and you can actually throw it in pretty quick because it's kind of cambered to your advantage, and you've got plenty of runoff off to the left, and just keep it going all the way down this long straight. Lots of fun, awesome noise, and yeah, that gearbox just feels a bit nicer to really smash through the gears compared with the GT. My best lap of the day was around 1:36. You can definitely get more out of it though. Some of the other journos, like Scott Newman, was getting around 1:33. But yeah, awesome potential and a lot better on the track compared with the GT.
I'll give you a demonstration of that launch control just so you can see what I mean. Track apps, launch settings, we'll do it at about 3,400. That's enabled. It should automatically let me go. Basically, you can take your foot off the clutch, just step off the clutch if you want to, and it will try to manage it, but it's best if you just gradually but progressively take your foot off the clutch. So it's flat foot, it's holding it at 3,000, well, it's not quite 3,400. I just kind of just released it pretty quickly, and it manages the wheel spin. But yeah, as you can see, it doesn't do anything with the clutch. That's all up to you. For me, if you concentrate on the clutch yourself, don't worry about launch control, let the wheels spin a little bit because you want the engine revs to be a little bit higher. That's where the power is, and you can manage it yourself. But just if you have launch control, it will stop you, spinning out of control because the stability control is still kind of active. It'll manage the wheel spin so it doesn't go berserk, even though it doesn't really do that anyway, unless you just drop your foot off the clutch in first gear off the mark, then it will just smoke the tires. And then you can snap second pretty quickly, gives it a good long chirp into second, but it doesn't just absolutely fry the tires into second gear. It's got good traction with these tires. Out on the highway, it's obviously a very pleasant cruise. Requires only about 1800 RPM in 6th gear at 110 kilometers an hour. Yeah, just purring along. I did actually find the rev matching button. It's just here in track apps, and you can turn that on and off if you want to. You've also got a number of gauges you can go through on the instrument cluster, so live tire pressure monitoring, your oil temperature and all that sort of thing, intake temperature. And then you have trip information. So this is averaging 15.2 litres per 100 kilometres, and that's included some highway driving, actually a fair bit of highway driving, as well as some performance testing and what we just done just then. So yeah, 15, it's pretty high I guess, but it's a muscle car. You can't expect absolute efficiency because you've just got that awesome V8 sound and performance. Speaking of which, let's head out now to the private road and do the performance test. I'll show you that line locker feature as well, and I'll show you a few runs in the Dark Horse we did at the track at the bend. We were limited to kind of 100 kilometers an hour on the track during our performance tests because it was only me and another guy, Josh Dowling, that were doing doing the performance tests, and we didn't have a helmet on, and they said, yeah, kind of leave it at 100 kilometers an hour, and that was it. But I did the full performance test, quarter mile and everything, with this example, the GT, on the private road. So to engage, clutch pedal in, hard on the brake, first gear, hit line lock, hold OK to initialize, firmly push down the brake pedal, hit OK again, and it's holding the front wheels completely stationary while the backs can spin away as much as they like. Then you just hit OK when you're finished. And enjoy the smoke. So the best I got today was 5.34. That was in race mode with the stability control turned off and no launch control. I applied about mid-range revs, so taking off from around 4,000 and progressively releasing the clutch while feeding in the rest of the throttle at the same time. It caused a little bit of wheel spin, but that just helped the engine rev, which is where the power is anyway.